And God will give him the courage of a lion. And God will give him the courage of a lion. Come, do not keep God waiting. Thousands have done it. And if you can find me one who has done it and been sorry afterwards, I will put off this dear uniform and never pray again. Come. Come. I know there is someone. Ah, I found him. Let the brave gentleman come to the front. Come, do not keep God waiting. Thousands have done it. And if you can find me one who has done it and been sorry afterwards, I will put off this dear uniform and never pray again. Come. Come. I know there is someone. Ah, I found him. Let the brave gentleman come to the front. You'll find my mother much more terrifying. You'll find my mother much more terrifying.
So this is one of the little surprises you promised. Heaven help me.
I regret to say so, sir. Sir!
Oh, excuse me.
I regret to say so, sir. Sir!
Oh, excuse me.
Hello, Stephen.
Oh, hello, Barbara.
Where's Mother?
In the study.
Oh, good.
One moment, Barbara. Mother has just sent for me. She wishes to see me alone.
Your father didn't exactly do wrong things, but he said them and thought them. That was what was so dreadful. He really had a sort of religion of wrongness. I couldn't forgive him for preaching immorality while he practiced morality. Your father didn't exactly do wrong things, but he said them and thought them. That was what was so dreadful. He really had a sort of religion of wrongness. However, you know, your father was a very attractive man in some ways. I didn't dislike him myself. Far from it. I couldn't forgive him for preaching immorality while he practiced morality. I've asked your father to come here this evening. Ring the bell, please. I've asked your father to come here this evening. Don't jump, Stephen. It fidgets me.
Do you mean to say that my father is coming here tonight?
I said 9. Ring the bell, please.
Many a sinner has played himself into heaven on the trombone, thanks to the army.
Really, Barbara, you go on as if religion were a pleasant subject. Do have some sense of propriety.
Many a sinner has played himself into heaven on the trombone, thanks to the army.
Yes, but getting into heaven isn't exactly in your line, is it?
Charles?
Well, it stands to reason, doesn't it? The canon business may be necessary and all that, but it isn't right, you know. On the other hand, there may be a certain amount of tosh about the Salvation Army, but still, you can't deny it is religion. And you can't go against religion. That is, not unless you're downright immoral, you can't.
You hardly appreciate my position, Mr. Lomax. My religion, my morality must have a place for cannons and torpedoes in it.
You speak as if there were half a dozen religions and moralities to choose from, instead of one true religion and one true morality.
For me, there is only one true morality. But it mightn't fit you, as you don't manufacture bombers. There's only one true morality for every man, but every man hasn't the same true morality.
Yeah. Would you mind saying it again? I didn't quite follow.
It's quite simple. As Euripides says, one man's meat is another man's poison, morally as well as physically.
Oh, that, yes, true.
In other words, some men are honest, some are scoundrels.
There are no scoundrels.
Indeed. Are there any good men?
No, not one. There are neither good men nor scoundrels. They're all just children of one father, and the sooner they stop calling one another names, the better. They're all just the same sort of sinner, and there's the same salvation waiting for them all.
Really, Barbara, you go on as if religion were a pleasant subject. Do have some sense of propriety.
And don't get up to any mischief, you two. And don't get up to any mischief, you two.
I fancy you guessed something of what's in my mind, Mr. Cousins. Exactly. But suppose Barbara should find you out.
You know, I don't admit imposing on Barbara. I am quite genuinely interested in the views of the Salvation Army. The fact is, I'm a sort of collector of religions. The curious thing is I find I can believe them all. By the way, have you any religion?
Oh, yes.
Anything out of the common?
I believe that there are two things necessary to salvation. Money and gunpowder.
Oh, Barbara won't stand that. You'll have to choose between your religion and Barbara.
So will you, my friend. She'll find out that that drum of yours is hollow.
Father Undershaft, you're mistaken. I'm a sincere Salvationist. You don't understand the Salvation Army. It's the army of joy, of love, of courage. It marches to fight the devil with music and dancing, with trumpet and drum. It picks the waster out of a public house and makes a man of him. It finds a worm wriggling in the back kitchen and lo, a woman. It takes the poor professor of Greek, the most artificial and self-suppressed of human creatures, and lets loose the rhapsodist in him. It sends him down the public street drumming dithyrambs.
Alarm the shelter.
Oh, they're accustomed to these sudden ecstasies. However, if the drum worries you... Tell that to Barbara if you dare.
I've hardly ever seen them so much moved as they were by your confession, Mr. Price.
Tell that to Barbara if you dare.
Half a bitter and put some gin in it.
Dog's nose, swallow, mate.
Dear friends, a month ago I was the unhappiest girl in London. I wanted pleasure. I drank. I swore. I was unclean in my mind and in my body. I was so miserable that I'd go out with any man. If he had enough money to treat me at every public house we passed.
Oh, I say.
Not one of you would have let your daughters speak to me or your sons be seen with me. I thought I was a grand girl, enjoying myself all the time. But I was lost. Miserable. One day I was going to a public house for another drink, and I saw an army meeting going on outside. Do you know who was conducting that meeting? Here he is. Sergeant Todger Fairmile, the greatest fighter in the Isle of Dogs.
Hello, Todger.
I laughed and mocked, stuck my tongue out at him. But he saw how unhappy I was. You poor, dirty, unhappy little wretch, he said. God has chosen you this day to have your face washed, your sins cleansed, and your soul lifted out of the mire of hell and saved. And then he put his hand on me. And it was as strong as the hand of God. Not just because his hands are so strong, but because it really was the hand of God. And from that hour, heaven opened to me, and I became as happy as an angel. Dear friends, don't you envy me? If that can happen to such a wretch as I was, how much more likely it is to happen to you. Dear Sergeant Pilgrim, my heart's overflowing.
You all know who I am?
Now, who are you?
Todger Fairmile.
And she's very anxious to meet you. For some reason or other.
Perhaps she'll convert you.
My dear, I shall be delighted.
And she's very anxious to meet you. For some reason or other.
Perhaps she'll convert you.
My dear, I shall be delighted.
Major!
Precisely. Precisely. Ah, what a relief. Steady, Machiavelli, steady.
Lend a hand, will you? Quick!
Right.
I'm afraid he's here for the night, sir.
Ah, what a relief.
Steady, man, steady.
The waves, the waves. How do we own a ship? Oh, steady, Machiavelli, steady.
Lend a hand, will you?
Rascal, who feel very strongly to my sense of ironic humor.
Quick!
Right.
I'm afraid he's here for the night, sir.
Good morning, Lady Britt.
Good morning, Adolphus.
Good morning, Lady Britt.
You look a little pale, my dear. I've made you unhappy, haven't I?
Do you understand what you've done to me? Yesterday, I had a man's soul in my hand. I set him in the way of life with his face to salvation. And when we took your money, he turned back again to drunkenness and derision. I'll never forgive you there. Never.
Does my daughter despair so easily? Can you strike a man to the heart and leave no mark on him? You forget, my dear. Bill Walker spat in Todger's eye to save his honor. He gave up his hard-earned pound to save his soul. Do you know what a pound means to such a man? It's your faith that's failing, not his. Will he ever strike a woman again as he struck Jenny Hill? You've sent him on the road to his salvation. It may not be your road, but he won't turn back.
Oh, yes, you're right. He can never be lost now. There's my faith.
Oh, clever, clever devil.
You may be a devil, but God speaks through you sometimes. You've given me back my happiness. I can feel it deep down now, though my spirit is troubled.
You've learnt something, my dear. That always feels at first as if you'd lost something. You look a little pale, my dear. I've made you unhappy, haven't I?
Do you understand what you've done to me? Yesterday, I had a man's soul in my hand. I set him in the way of life with his face to salvation. And when we took your money, he turned back again to drunkenness and derision. I'll never forgive you that. Never.
Does my daughter despair so easily? Can you strike a man to the heart and leave no mark on him? You forget, my dear. Bill Walker spat in Todger's eye to save his honor. He gave up his hard-earned pound to save his soul. Do you know what a pound means to such a man? It's your faith that's failing, not his. Will he ever strike a woman again as he struck Jenny Hill? You've sent him on the road to his salvation. It may not be your road, but he won't turn back.
Yes, you're right. I'll never be lost now. Where was my faith?
Oh, clever, clever devil.
You may be a devil, but God speaks through you sometimes. I've always thought of it as a sort of pit where lost creatures with blackened faces stirred up smoking fires and were driven and tormented by my father. Is it like that, Papa?
My dear, you'll see for yourself.
I've always thought of it as a sort of pit where lost creatures with blackened faces stirred up smoking fires and were driven and tormented by my father. Is it like that, Papa?
My dear, you'll see for yourself.
Here's your smoky pit, Barbara.
Hello! The old boy knows how to put himself across.
It's the most vulgar exhibition I've ever seen. I won't have my name flaunted over the whole of Hampshire.
Hampshire, my dear, it can be seen from Surrey, Wiltshire and Somerset as well, and 5 miles out at sea in an aeroplane. The advertisement is worth thousands a year to us. And incidentally, my love, to you. Predecessors, the old swordsmiths, used the same stuff, boiling steel.
Have you found anything discreditable? No. The men call him Dandy Andy, and are proud he's a cunning old rascal. But it's all horribly, frightfully, immorally, unanswerably perfect. I want Barbara.
Like most young men, greatly exaggerate the difference between one young woman and another.
Quite true, Dolly. I refuse to walk another step through all these sheds and pipes and boilers.
This is where my workers live.
Slavery, I call it.
Do you, my dear?
What about your church exhibition, Juan?
Exactly, Mr. Lomax. It's a result of our belief in religious freedom. Its official name is the meeting place of all the religions. The men call it Piety Square. Well, my dear Stephen, what do you think of the place?
Well, I have only one misgiving about it all.
Out with it.
I can't help thinking that all this provision for every want of your workmen may sap their sense of responsibility. And greatly as we enjoyed our luncheon in that splendid restaurant, still you must remember that restaurants break up home life. Look at the Continent, for instance. Are you sure that all this pampering is really good for the men's characters?
A sufficient dose of anxiety is always provided by the fact that we may all be blown to smithereens at any moment.
It only needs a cathedral to be a heavenly city instead of a hellish one.
Now, children, have you seen everything?
Enough to realize what an immense power this place represents.
Ah, so you're lusting for power, young man.
If power were my aim, I shouldn't come here for it. You have no power?
None of my own, certainly.
I have more power than you, more will. You don't drive this place, it drives you.
And what drives the place?
A will of which I am a part.
Father, do you know what you're saying? Or are you laying a snare for my soul?
Don't listen to his metaphysics, Barbara. The place is driven by the most rascally part of society, the money hunters, the pleasure hunters, the military promotion hunters. And he is their slave.
Not at all. You tar me, Euripides, with your morality mongering. If you good people prefer preaching and shirking to buying my weapons and fighting the rascals, don't blame me. I can make cannons. I can't make courage and conviction. Ask Barbara. She understands. Tell him, my love, what power really means.
Before I joined the Salvation Army, I was in my own power. And the consequence was I never knew what to do with myself. When I joined it, I hadn't time enough for all the things I had to do.
Just so. And why was that, you suppose?
Yesterday, I should have said because I was in the power of God. But you came and showed me that I was in the power of Bodger and Undershaft. I stood on the rock I thought eternal. And without a word of warning, it reeled and crumbled under me. I was safe with an infinite wisdom watching me, an army marching to salvation with me. And in a moment, at a stroke of your pen in a checkbook, I stood alone. And the heavens were empty.
Come, come, my daughter, don't make too much of your little tin pot tragedy. What do we do here when we spend years of work and thought and thousands of pounds of solid cash on a new gun that turns out just a hair's breadth wrong after all? Scrap it without wasting another hour or another pound on it. Well, you made for yourself something that you call a morality or religion or whatnot. It doesn't fit the facts. All right then, scrap it. Scrap it and get one that does fit. That's what's wrong with the world at present. It scraps its obsolete steam engines and dynamos, but it won't scrap its old prejudices and its old moralities and its old religions. And what's the result? In machinery, it does very well. But in morals and religions and politics, it's working at a loss that brings it nearer to bankruptcy every year. Don't persist in that folly. If your old religion broke down yesterday, get a newer and a better one for tomorrow.
How gladly I would take a better one to my soul. But you offer me a worse. Justify yourself. Show me some light through the darkness of that dreadful place, with its beautifully clean workshops and respectable workmen and model homes.
Cleanliness and respectability don't need justification, Barbara. They justify themselves. I see no darkness here, no dreadfulness. In your salvation shelter, I saw poverty, misery, cold, and hunger. You gave them bread and scrape and dreams of heaven. I give them £3 a week to 12,000 a year. They find their own dreams, and I look after the drainage.
And what about their souls?
I save their souls just as I saved yours.
You saved my soul? What do you mean?
I enabled Barbara to become Major Barbara. And I saved her soul from the crime of poverty.
You call poverty a crime?
Yes, the worst of crimes. You talk of your half-saved ruffian from the shelter. You accuse me of dragging his soul back to perdition. Well, here I can drag his soul back to salvation for you, not by words and dreams, but by a good salary, a sound house in a handsome street, and a permanent job.
And will he be the better for that?
You know he will. Don't be a hypocrite, Barbara. It's cheap work converting starving men with a Bible in one hand and a slice of bread in the other. Try your hand on my men. Their souls are hungry because their bodies are full.
Stop making speeches, Andrew. This is not the place for them.
My dear, I have no other means of conveying my ideas.
Your ideas are nonsense. You got on because you were selfish and unscrupulous.
Not at all. I have the strongest scruples about poverty and slavery. I hate them worse than any other crimes whatsoever. And let me tell you this. Poverty and slavery have stood up for centuries to your sermons and leading articles. They won't stand up to my machine guns. Don't preach at them. Don't reason with them. Kill them.
Killing? Is that your remedy for everything?
It's the final test of conviction. The only way of saying must. Let 670 fools loose in the streets, and 3 mounted policemen can scatter them. But huddle them together in a certain house in Westminster, let them go through certain ceremonies and call themselves certain names, until at last they have the courage to kill, and your 670 fools become a government.
That's perhaps why, like most intelligent people, I never vote.
When you vote, you only change the names of the cabinet. When you shoot, you pull down governments, inaugurate new epochs, abolish old orders, and set up new. Is that historically true, Mr. Learned Man? Or is it not?
It is historically true. I loathe having to admit it. I repudiate your sentiments. I abhor your nature. I defy you in every possible way. Still, it is true. But it ought not to be true.
Ought. Are you going to spend your life saying ought like the rest of our moralists? Turn your oughts into shells, man. Come and make explosives with me. Whatever can blow man up can blow society up. The history of the world is the history of those who had courage enough to embrace that truth. Have you the courage to embrace it, Barbara?
Barbara, I positively forbid you to listen to your father's abominable wickedness. Come home instantly, children. Andrew, I'm exceedingly sorry I allowed you to call on us. You're wickeder than ever.
The fact is, you know, there's a certain amount of tosh about this notion of wickedness. After all sorts of chaps are always doing all sorts of things, and we have to fit them in somehow, you know. I mean, say, you can't go about cutting everybody, and that's about what it comes to. Perhaps I don't make myself clear.
Your lucidity itself. By the way, may I call you Charles?
Delighted. Charlie's the usual ticket.
Biddy?
Don't dare call me Biddy. Charles Lomax, you're a fool. Andrew, you're a vulgar tradesman. And to think of all that being yours, and you've kept it yourself all these years.
It doesn't belong to me. I belong to it. It's the undershaft inheritance.
But the moment I saw Barbara, I wanted her far more than the approval of my conscience.
Adolphus.
It's true. You accused me yourself, Lady Britt, of joining the army to worship Barbara, and so I did. I adored what was divine in her and was therefore a true worshipper. She bought my soul like a flower at a street corner, but she bought it for herself. I was romantic about her, too. I thought she was a woman of the people. And the marriage with a professor of Greek would be far beyond the wildest social ambitions of her rank.
Well, I can't afford to be too particular. He's cornered the foundling market. Let it pass. You're eligible, Euripides. You're eligible.
Take care, there's an abyss of horror between me and your accursed gunpowder. How about the moral question?
There's no moral question in the matter at all, Adolphus. You must simply sell arms to people whose cause is right and just, and refuse them to foreigners and criminals.
No, none of that. You must keep the true faith of an armourer, or you don't come in here.
What on earth's the true faith of an armourer?
To give arms to all men who offer an honest price for them, without respect of persons or principles. The first undershaft wrote up in his shop, if God gave the hand, let not man withhold the sword. The second wrote up, all have the right to fight, none have the right to judge. The third wrote up, to man the weapon, to heaven the victory. The fourth had no literary turn, so he didn't write up anything, but he sold cannons to Napoleon under the nose of George III. The fifth wrote up, peace shall not prevail save with a sword in her hand. But the sixth, my master, was best of all. He wrote up, nothing is ever done in this world until men are prepared to kill one another if it's not done. After that, there was nothing left for me to say. So I wrote up simply, unashamed.
Do you know the creature's really a sort of poet in his way? Suppose he's a great man, after all.
You're fencing, Euripides. You're weakening. Your grip is slipping. Come, choose, man. Choose.
Perhaps Barbara won't marry me. I make the wrong choice.
Perhaps not.
You hear?
Never mind Barbara for the present. Let's settle the practical details and leave your final decision open. Come into my office. You know that you'll have to change your name. Do you object to that?
You're a shark of the first order, Euripides. So much the better for the firm.
Is the bargain closed, Dolly? Does your soul belong to him now?
No, the price is settled, that's all.
Dolly, old fellow.
You dare offer a miserable 1,000 to the son-in-law of a millionaire? No, by heavens, Machiavelli, you shall not cheat me. You can't do without me, and I can do without you. I must have £2,500 a year for 2 years. You dare offer a miserable 1,000 to the son-in-law of a millionaire? No, by heavens, Machiavelli, you shall not cheat me. You can't do without me, and I can do without you. I must have £2,500 a year for 2 years.
Only she thought it was all the houses and the kitchen ranges and the linen and the china. But it was really all the human souls to be saved. Not weak souls in starved bodies, sobbing with gratitude for a scrap of bread and scrape. But souls that are hungry because their bodies are full. My father shall never throw it in my teeth again that my converts were bribed with bread.